Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And, time for the last year-end list. You know, for as bad as a year as 2016 was, I think purely for the Wonky Angle, 2016 wasn't that bad. Like, this channel has been growing way faster than I could have ever imagined. Like, I've already got over 1,800 subscribers, and that is crazy for a channel that's only been around for a year and a half. Sure, there's been some bumps on the road, like, Eric Prydz Fluminautica fans, but, I mean, I covered every album from Deadmau5, Aphex Twin, and Air. I made several successful countdowns, including my favorites of all time list. And I finally got to get out all my thoughts on David Guetta. I even came across actual nice fan bases like STS9 who offered to buy me tickets to see them live, though I respectfully declined. I had a nice chat on Facebook with Gaz Cobain of all people, and the FSOL fan base. Got shoutouts from several artists who enjoy my reviews. Things have been pretty good, all things considered. And as for the actual new music, well, we got quite a bit of good stuff on that end too. Sure, that new Hybrid album that was supposed to come out like well over a year ago is still nowhere to be found. But we got lots of solid comebacks from old favorite artists, and I even discovered a lot of new music from artists I'd never heard of previously. While admittedly the majority of this list falls into the former category, I still feel like this would be a good time to celebrate the stuff that made my year better, even if I've already reviewed most of these. But I'm sure we know the drill. Let's get into the top 10 best albums of 2016. Specifically just the electronic ones, because I'm the electronic guy. So let's start out with the honorable mentions. There's 8 of those. And don't worry, there's no ties anywhere on this list this time, so let's just get right into it. Honorable mention number 1, Tim Hecker, Love Streams. I'll admit this isn't the best thing Tim Hecker has ever done, but it is the album that pushed me into finally checking out this guy, so there's gotta be some points there. And hey, it's still a pretty awesome ambient excursion in its own right. Honorable mention number 2, Autumn of Communion, Polydeuces. This is probably my favorite Lee Norris related release from this year, once again keeping up the usual Pete Namlook inspired sound and coming out with 6 easily enjoyable tracks. Didn't really get to reviewing this one, but still, great stuff. As is basically anything by Autumn of Communion, go check them out. Also shout out to the Angling Losers Arena of Apprehension, which I reviewed earlier. Also pretty solid ambient release. Honorable mention number 3, Ulrich Schnaus, No Further Ahead Than Today. Not much here to say that I didn't cover in the review, but if you're looking for something big and emotional, or an old electronic staple pulling out some good material for the first time in a long time, actually, or something kind of post-rockish, but also something kind of IDM-ish, Ulrich Schnaus delivered here. Didn't expect this to even exist, let alone be as good as it was, so good on him. Honorable mention number 4, Matmos, Ultimate Care 2. It's music made with a washing machine, and it's way better than one would expect. Check out my review. Honorable mention number 5, Soria Mayer aka DJ Dooms with Indefinite Life. Honestly, in my opinion, this is better vaporwave than that new 2814 album. Well, that new 2814 wasn't really vaporwave, but still, I like this more. This is connected with me in a way that a lot of vaporwave albums really haven't. Nice variety, nice atmosphere, good stuff overall. Check out my review for more details, and check out this guy. He's good. Honorable mention number 6, Oudiker with Elsek 1 through 5. Okay, this one isn't going to be that brief. I re-listened to this album, and while I stand it did not need to be 4 hours long, and the good amount needed to be cut, I'd say about 3 of those hours were actually fairly justified. Elsek 1 was a lot better than I remember 2, and Elsek 3 wasn't as good as I remembered, but whatever. Though I will have to admit, coming back to this album, even once more, took a while, because Outakar apparently have one of the most toxic fan bases I've ever seen. Slamming me for not giving the album a 10 or not pronouncing it the same way they do, despite the fact that there's like a million different pronunciations. Or just slamming me for having an opinion in general. For several months on end. Like, ugh. I couldn't even think about this band for a long time without wanting to break into a huge rant about these people. They were much more persistent and annoying than even the Eric Prydz fans that I had to make an entire video addressing. I did notice that a well-meaning fan posted that review on Outakar's Reddit page, which would explain a lot, and if that guy would do me a favor and not do that again, that'd be great. But thankfully, that's all subsided, and I can just sit back and enjoy this album for what it is again. It's not all great, but the good stuff on here is some of the best they've ever done. Honorable mention number 7, Opus 84, Future in the Stars. The problems I mentioned in my review still stand, but I've been returning to this one with quite a bit more regularity than I thought I would. Also, thanks to the artist for adding the bonus track like I requested, now called Untitled Hillside. Glad that people can get a chance to hear that track. Honorable mention number 8, Brian Eno, The Ship. Again, check my review out. But I'd like to reiterate that it's just great to see Eno still at it and still making creative ambient music nearly 40 years into his career. This was awesome. And that's all my honorable mentions. Now let's get into the list proper. Number 10. Vince Clarke and Paul Hartnell, Two Square. Anyone who knows me is probably not at all surprised that this appears on my list, given my status as a near-obsessive Orbital fan, but maybe more surprised that this isn't higher up on the list. And yeah, as far as Orbital side projects go, this is admittedly pretty underwhelming for me. It's nothing new and there's very little of it, but that doesn't mean the experience wasn't worth it. The first two and last two tracks have never gotten old. And, the song I previously labeled my least favorite, Single Function, no longer has that distinction. It's actually a pretty cool track. Albums where I keep ending up liking my least favorite are doing something right, even if the least favorite keeps fluctuating around. It's far from perfect, but there's nothing actually bad on here. I've listened to it a lot, and it's nice for a bit of fun every now and then. I just wish there was a CD release. Number 9. Monolake with VLSI. I waited 4 years for a new Monolake album, and now that I actually have it in my possession, I'm very glad to see Robert Hankey back. Well, okay, he never actually left, but he'd been releasing EPs on a regular basis since Ghosts, but VLSI is not only my favorite Monolake album since Polygon Cities, it's probably his most consistent since CinemaScope. This album is basically the more easily digestible version of that latest Outakar album. A typically cold atmosphere, but nice melodies, abstract but accessible beats, and only about 1 hour instead of 4. It was really refreshing to see this guy with some new material. Go check it out if you haven't already. Number 8. M83, Junk. Weren't expecting this one to show up on the list, were ya? But yeah, this is one of those albums that's been growing on me ever since I reviewed it. I can understand why not everyone liked it, but I love the cheesy, old, late 70s, early 80s sound that sounds like a cheap film soundtrack. I think it sounds great. I like basically all the melodies and the atmosphere, and while there are some less memorable moments on here, I'd be lying if I said I didn't end up thoroughly enjoying this and coming back to it with quite a bit of frequency. I think Junk is a great album. Relaxing, emotional, been coming back to a lot more than I thought I would. Number 7. Plaid, The Digging Remedy. I'm sure this one also came as a surprise to no one who saw my review. I'm always game for some new material from Plaid, even if their last two albums were kind of underwhelming. This one certainly was not. The melodies on here are fantastic, the weirdness and variety is spot on as usual, and it hits all the right notes I'd want out of a new Plaid album. Songs like Clock, Mellifer, You Mountain, and When have been keeping me coming back to the album over and over. And even the less memorable tracks are good too. Sure, it'd be nice if they came out with something a little longer, but hey, 12 tracks is good enough for me. Looking forward to whatever they plan on doing next. Number 6. Banco de Gaia, the Ninth of Nine Hearts. First of all, I'm surprised as many people saw my review of this as they did, thanks to Banco himself sharing the review on Facebook, which is awesome. But I stand by what I said. Just like with Plaid, this is one of Banco's best albums in a long time. Even longer time than Plaid, for the record. Sure, there were some samples I recognized from my own music, and that was very weird, but the guy really took himself totally seriously for the first time in maybe ever, and it resulted in a heavily detailed, fascinating, and varied and emotional journey that was a ton of fun to get through. The saxophonist from Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, Dick Perry, even makes an appearance here, and it is awesome. A lot of cool stuff in here. Go check it out. Also, just go check out anything by this artist. He's pretty underrated. Number 5. DJ Shadow, The Mountain Will Fall.
Speak, nobody get choked.
This is another one of those albums that has just been getting better and better every time I hear it. First I was like, ooh, this sounds like a trap album. What are you doing, Shadow? And now, I like every single song on here except for the bonus track. Even songs that were previously just boring, like 3 Ralphs, I don't mind anymore. And Mambo was stuck in my head an entire day at one point. I now love that track. The abstract and dark stuff isn't the best I've ever heard, but it's all growing on me. And the good tracks on here like Nobody Speaks, Sideshow, and Ashes to Oceans have only been getting better as well. This album went from being the first decent, remotely trap-focused album I've ever heard, to just another great DJ Shadow album that made it halfway up my list. Awesome stuff. Number 4. Jean-Michel Jarre, Oxygen 3. I usually don't like it when my reviews blow up by themselves, as they fill up the comments with people thinking I'm a maybe girl Harry Potter with diabetes or something. Or just people who think they're always right and I suck for having an opinion. But I was more than happy to see people enthusiastic over my Jean-Michel Jarre review. I mean, I did see a lot of people who thought this album was terrible, and as you can tell from its ranking on this list, I certainly can't say I agree. With enough repeat listens, Oxygen 3 went from being disappointing and weak to basically everything I had hoped for going into it for the first time. It's one of my favorite Jarre projects in a long time. Even better than his recent electronica project, which made my list last year. I say it's absolutely worth your time. Give it a chance even if it doesn't hit you right away. Once it clicks, it really clicks. Number 3. The Future Sound of London, with Environment 6 and 6.5. First of all, holy crap, did I mention that I had a pretty lengthy Facebook discussion with Gaz Cobain and the FSOL fanbase not long after this review dropped? Like, I basically never use Facebook and it was weird and confusing, but that was absolutely awesome. Going back to these albums, as you might guess, they're awesome. Environment 6 is like seeing FSOL bring back their early Lifeforms and Accelerator days, and 6.5 is much more like their recent stuff, which has a lot more live instrumentation and psychedelic elements. Both are absolutely awesome, and while 6.5 is significantly better in my opinion, getting a double-length journey with all the amazing attention to detail and textures that characterize all of FSOL's work was just a real pleasure. Go check both of these out, seriously. Number 2. BT_. Again, given that Electronic Opus topped my list last year, I'm sure people are more surprised that this wasn't my number 1. And as I mentioned in my review, I do have my problems with it, but the fact remains that this is still BT, making all his excellent IDM and ambient stuff. My least favorites on here are good, but my favorites on here are some of my favorite songs out of BT to date, like Artifacture and Omega. And this is coming out of the producer who has 2 albums in my top 10 favorite of all time list. So that should be saying something. I still think BT is freaking amazing, and this album is just absolutely breathtaking all the way through. Now, the only question is, what could possibly top BT this year when even Paul Hartnell couldn't last year? The answer might surprise you. Actually, no, it's the Avalanches. Oh my god, when I heard that the Avalanches were coming out with a new album this year, I didn't believe it. But then new singles started dropping, and a pre-order came up on iTunes, and then it actually did come out. Like, holy shit, that actually happened. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better time for the Avalanches to finally come out of their 16-year hiatus. As I mentioned in my review, this is fucking 2016. This was a year so mind-blowingly bad that we're probably going to be talking about it for years to come. So the fact that not only did we get the Avalanches back, but that they also came out with one of the most overly sunny, sugary, and happy albums I've ever heard in my life certainly helped me get through the darkest parts of this year. And not only that, in my review, I was already completely gushing over it, but it's another album that gets better and better every time I hear it, and I bet you in a few years, this could qualify for the top 20 of favorites of all time list, maybe even top 10. I freaking love this album, and I really needed something like this year. I'm just hoping their next one doesn't take another 16 years to come out, but even if it does, I'm sure it'll be worth it just to hear these guys do something again. And that is the end of my list. Of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. So leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.
You walk on the subway.